Commander Zethkar of the Vortanian Defense Fleet sat in the dimly lit cantina, his 6 arms wrapped around a glass of fermented kelp juice. The blue liquid glowed softly in the artificial lighting of Station Omega-7, one of the galaxy's most remote trading posts. His chitinous exoskeleton bore the scars of countless battles, each mark telling a story of survival against impossible odds. The cantina buzzed with the usual mix of species from across the galaxy. Tall, graceful Etherians floated near the ceiling, their translucent forms shimmering. Stocky Corvan miners sat in their environmental suits, their methane-breathing apparatus hissing softly. Even a few of the insectoid hive-mind representatives clicked and chittered in their corner booth. But Zethkar paid them no attention. His 4 compound eyes were fixed on the young Vortanian officer who had just approached his table. Lieutenant Crixtel was fresh from the academy, his carapace still bearing the bright blue coloring of youth, unmarked by battle scars. "Commander Zethkar?" the young officer asked, his mandibles clicking nervously. "I'm Lieutenant Crixtel from the 47th Reconnaissance Squadron. My commanding officer said you wanted to speak with me before our mission to the Outer Rim territories." Zethkar gestured with one of his lower arms to the empty chair across from him. "Sit, Lieutenant. What do you know about humans?" Crixtel's antennae twitched in confusion. "Humans, sir? They're one of the newer species to join the Galactic Council. Relatively primitive technology, carbon-based, bipedal. They've been expanding their territory in the past 50 cycles. Why do you ask?" The old commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or concern. "Tell me, young one, what does your reconnaissance mission involve?" "We're investigating reports of illegal mining operations in the Kepler sector, sir. Intelligence suggests that human corporations might be involved in strip mining protected worlds." Crixtel straightened in his chair, eager to prove his worth. "My squadron is prepared to issue cease and desist orders and, if necessary, engage any resistance." Zethkar set down his glass with such force that the blue liquid sloshed over the rim. His scarred face turned toward the lieutenant, and for a moment, the younger officer could see something that made his chitin crawl with fear. "Lieutenant," Zethkar said slowly, "I want you to cancel that mission." "Sir, I don't understand. The orders come directly from High Command. We can't just—" "You can, and you will." Zethkar leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Because I'm going to tell you something that High Command doesn't want you to know, something they've classified at the highest levels, something that could save your life and the lives of every being under your command." The cantina's noise seemed to fade around them as Zethkar began his story. 15 cycles ago, I commanded the battleship Relentless Tide. We were part of a joint operation with 12 other species, investigating what we believed was a human pirate fleet that had been raiding cargo vessels in the neutral zone. The reports made it sound simple, poorly armed civilian ships, probably desperate colonists trying to survive in the frontier regions. Zethkar paused to take another sip of his drink, and Crixtel noticed that the commander's primary hands were trembling slightly. "We assembled a massive fleet, 200 ships from the finest military forces in the galaxy. Vortanian heavy cruisers, Etherian stealth frigates, Corvan assault vessels, even a few of the Hive Mind's bioships. We had enough firepower to level a small moon." "What happened?" Crixtel asked, though something in his commander's tone made him dread the answer. "We found them," Zethkar continued. 12 human ships in a debris field near an asteroid belt. Old ships, by our standards. Some of them looked like converted cargo haulers. We opened communications, gave them the standard warning to surrender peacefully." The commander's 4 eyes stared into the distance, seeing something that wasn't in the cantina. Their response was unusual. A human female appeared on our screens. She looked young by their standards, with long brown hair and these strange pale eyes. She was wearing what looked like a modified mining suit, but she carried herself like a warrior. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost friendly. Zethkar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep agitation among his species. She said, and I remember her exact words, "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Free Trade Consortium. You have entered our territory with hostile intent. We strongly advise you to withdraw immediately." "That's it?" Crixtel asked. "No threats, no posturing." "That's what made it so terrifying," Zethkar replied. "Admiral Vexthal, may his memory be honored, was commanding the operation. He was a veteran of the Corvan Wars, the Etherian Uprising, the Hive Mind expansion conflicts. He'd never lost a battle. He laughed at the humans' warning and ordered the fleet to attack. The old commander fell silent for a long moment, staring at his reflection in the blue liquid. What I'm about to tell you, Lieutenant, will sound impossible. It goes against everything we think we know about warfare, about physics, about the very nature of combat in space. But I was there. I saw it happen. Zethkar's voice dropped even lower, forcing Crixtal to lean across the table to hear him. The humans didn't try to run. They didn't call for reinforcements. Those 12 ships turned toward our fleet of 200 and charged straight at us. Suicide run, Crixtal suggested. That's what we thought. Admiral Vexthal ordered concentrated fire on the lead ship. 50 of our finest vessels focused their main batteries on a single human vessel. The energy output should have vaporized anything smaller than a battle station. Zethkar's hands clenched around his glass. The ship absorbed the hits, not deflected, not shielded, absorbed. The hull glowed white-hot, but it kept coming. And then something impossible happened. The commander paused, looking directly at Crixtal. The human ship fired back, a single beam of energy that cut through space like a blade of pure destruction. It passed through 14 of our ships, front to back, as if their hulls were made of paper. 14 ships, Lieutenant, gone in less than 3 seconds. Crixtal's antennae drooped in disbelief. That's impossible, sir. No weapon has that kind of penetrating power. That's what I thought too, Zethkar continued. But then the other 11 human ships opened fire. Each beam was different. Some were broad and diffuse, melting through armor like acid. Others were needle-thin, punching through multiple targets. One ship fired what looked like metal projectiles, but they moved at relativistic speeds and hit with the force of small asteroids. The lieutenant's breathing apparatus cycled faster, a sign of stress among Vortanians. In the first 30 seconds of combat, we lost 60 ships, Zethkar said flatly. The humans moved through our formation like predators hunting in a pack. They didn't just attack, they coordinated in ways that seemed impossible. No communication delays, no hesitation, no confusion. It was as if they shared a single mind. The Admiral ordered a retreat. Admiral Vexthal was dead, Zethkar replied. His flagship was one of the first to fall. Command fell to me, and yes, I ordered what was left of the fleet to withdraw, but the humans didn't let us go. The old commander's voice became hollow, distant. They hunted us. For 6 hours, they chased down every ship that tried to escape. Not random attacks, targeted, precise strikes. They seemed to know exactly which ships carried the most personnel, which ones had the best defensive systems, which ones were trying to send distress signals. How did you survive? I didn't order my ship to run, Zethkar said quietly. When I saw what was happening, I shut down all systems except life support and let the relentless tide drift dead in space. I gambled that the humans would ignore a ship that posed no threat. And it worked. For a while, I watched through the passive sensors as they systematically destroyed the rest of our fleet. When it was over, that female captain, Sarah Chen, opened a communication channel to my ship. Zethkar's mandibles began clicking rapidly again. She knew I was alive, knew I was watching. She looked directly into the camera and said, Commander Zethkar of the Vortanian Defense Fleet, you have witnessed what happens when someone threatens human interests. You will return to your people and deliver a message. What message? That humans are not pirates, refugees, or desperate colonists scratching out a living on the frontier. They are apex predators who have been playing at being civilized members of the galactic community. They allow other species to believe they are weak, primitive, and harmless because it serves their purposes. Zethkar stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the metal floor. She told me that humanity had been watching and learning from every species in the galaxy, studying our weapons, our tactics, our weaknesses. They had been preparing for the day when someone would try to push them too far. But sir, Crixtal protested, humans have been active members of the Galactic Council. They participate in joint military exercises, share technology, contribute to peacekeeping operations. If they were hostile, surely. That's what makes them so dangerous, Zethkar interrupted. They don't appear hostile. They smile, they shake hands with whatever appendages you have, they offer aid during natural disasters, they seem genuinely interested in peaceful coexistence. But underneath that friendly exterior, they are always watching, always learning, always preparing. The old commander began packing around the table, his movements agitated. Do you know what humans call it when they study potential enemies while pretending to be friends? Intelligence gathering. Do you know what they call it when they learn to mimic the behavior of their prey to get close enough to strike? Hunting. Crystal's compound eyes tracked his commander's movement. You're saying that humans have been hunting the entire galaxy. I'm saying that humans are the galaxy's apex predators, and every other species is potential prey, Zethkar replied grimly. They've spent the last century since first contact learning everything there is to know about every major species. Our biology, our psychology, our military capabilities, our resource needs, our political systems, our cultural weaknesses. But why? What do they want? Zethkar stopped packing and stared out through the cantina's viewport at the stars beyond. That's the most terrifying part, Lieutenant. I don't think they want anything specific. I think hunting is just what they do. It's their nature. On their homeworld, they were persistence hunters. They would chase their prey for days, weeks even, never stopping, never giving up, until their target collapsed from exhaustion. The commander turned back to face Crystal. Space is just a larger hunting ground. But surely the Galactic Council knows about this incident. Why haven't they taken action? Because officially it never happened, Zethkar said bitterly. The mission was classified. The survivors were sworn to secrecy. The human ships were listed as unknown alien vessels in the official reports. High Command decided that revealing the truth would cause panic across the galaxy. And you've kept silent all this time. Until now, because I've been watching, Lieutenant. I've been paying attention to human expansion, human trade routes, human diplomatic activities. Do you know how many pirate attacks in human space have been resolved by human security forces? Do you know how many rescue operations have resulted in human ships arriving at disasters before distress signals were even sent? Crystal's breathing grew more rapid. You think they're orchestrating these incidents? I think they're managing them, Zethkar corrected. Creating situations that require their intervention, that make other species dependent on their help, that give them legitimate reasons to position their ships throughout the galaxy. The old commander sat back down, suddenly looking tired. 15 cycles ago, humans had a small territory around their home system. Today, they have trade agreements with every major species, military bases in 12 sectors, and merchant vessels in virtually every populated system. They've accomplished in 50 cycles what most species take millennia to achieve. What are you saying I should do? Cancel your mission, Zethkar said firmly. Report that your sensors detected no illegal mining activity. File a report stating that the Kepler sector is empty except for natural phenomena. But if there really are illegal mining operations, then let the humans deal with them, Zethkar interrupted. Because if you encounter human ships in that sector, Lieutenant, you will not be dealing with illegal miners. You will be dealing with apex predators who have been waiting for an excuse to demonstrate their capabilities. Crystal stood slowly, his mind reeling from everything he had heard. Sir, I have to ask, if humans are as dangerous as you say, why are you warning me? Why risk breaking your oath of silence? Zethkar looked up at the young officer with eyes that held the weight of 15 cycles of terrible knowledge. Because, Lieutenant, you remind me of myself at your age. Eager, confident, ready to face any challenge. I thought I understood what warfare meant, what it took to survive in this galaxy. I was wrong. The old commander stood and placed one of his hands on Crystal's shoulder. And because I've seen what humans do to those who threaten them. I've watched the recordings from survivors of other incidents that officially never happened. Humans don't just defeat their enemies, Lieutenant. They study them first, learn everything about them, and then they destroy them so completely that nothing remains but cautionary tales whispered in bars on remote stations. You think they would do that to the entire galaxy? I think they're already doing it, Zethkar replied quietly. One species at a time, one sector at a time, always with plausible deniability, always with legitimate justification, always with that same friendly smile. The two Vortanians stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling between them. What happens now? Crystal asked finally. Now you make a choice, Zethkar said. You can ignore what I've told you and proceed with your mission. You can report me for spreading classified information and seditious theories. Or you can accept that there are predators in this galaxy far more dangerous than any of us imagined. And if I choose to believe you, Then you go back to your squadron, cancel the mission, and pray that humans never decide your species poses a threat to their interests, Zethkar replied. Because if they do, Lieutenant, all the military might of the Vortanian Defense Fleet won't be enough to save us. As Crixtal walked away from the table, his mind churning with doubts and fears he had never experienced before, Zethkar called out one final warning. Lieutenant, if you do encounter humans in space, remember this. They are never as helpless as they appear, never as friendly as they seem, and never, ever as unprepared as they pretend to be. The old commander watched the young officer leave the cantina, then returned to his drink. Around him, the normal sounds of the station continued, traders negotiating deals, travelers sharing stories, maintenance crews going about their duties. But Zethkar knew that somewhere in the darkness between the stars, human ships were moving with purpose and patience, carrying out plans that would not be revealed until it was far too late to stop them. He raised his glass in a bitter toast to absent friends and whispered the human phrase that Captain Sarah Chen had taught him 15 cycles ago. Happy hunting. 3 days after his conversation with Commander Zethkar, Lieutenant Crixtal sat in the briefing room aboard the Vortanian cruiser Swift Current. Despite the commander's warnings, he had decided to proceed with the mission. The young officer convinced himself that Zethkar was suffering from combat trauma, that his stories were the product of a damaged mind trying to make sense of a military disaster. Around the briefing table sat the commanders of the other ships in the reconnaissance squadron. Captain Veltara of the Plasma Dancer, a sleek Etherian vessel designed for stealth operations. Commander Thokmer of the Corvan Heavy Fighter Iron Fist, his environmental suit hissing softly as it recycled his methane atmosphere. Even Sub-Queen Zizikaith represented the hive mind contingent with her bioship living weapon. Intelligence reports indicate at least 15 human vessels operating in the Kepler sector, Crixtal began, activating the holographic display in the center of the table. Red dots appeared in a three-dimensional star map, showing the suspected locations of human mining operations. They appear to be strip mining the asteroid belt around, a system that was designated as a protected stellar nursery by the Galactic Council. Captain Veltara's form shimmered as she spoke, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. My stealth sensors show no signs of large-scale industrial activity. Are we certain these readings are accurate? The reports come from automated monitoring stations placed throughout the sector, Crixtal replied. Energy signatures consistent with matter conversion devices, gravitational anomalies suggesting large-scale mass displacement, and debris patterns indicating systematic asteroid destruction. Commander Thokmer's translator device converted his guttural Corvan speech into standard galactic. Human mining equipment is primitive compared to our standards. They would need hundreds of ships to cause the kind of damage these reports describe. Which is why we're here, Crixtal said, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. To investigate and, if necessary, enforce Council regulations. Sub-Queen Zizikaith's insectoid head tilted at an angle that would have been impossible for most species. When she spoke, it was through a combination of pheromone releases and clicking sounds that the universal translator struggled to process. The hive mind questions the wisdom of this approach. Humans are unusual in their behavioral patterns. In what way? Crixtal asked. They do not think as individuals or as a collective consciousness. They operate in small groups with complex social hierarchies that shift depending on circumstances. This makes their responses unpredictable. Captain Veltara's luminous form flickered with what might have been concern. My people have had limited contact with humans, but our empathic abilities detect unusual thought patterns when we interact with them. They seem to be constantly evaluating potential threats and opportunities simultaneously. Commander Thokmer slammed a heavy fist on the table, making the holographic display flicker. Enough speculation. Humans are carbon-based bipeds with simple technology and no significant military history. If they're violating Council regulations, we tell them to stop. If they refuse, we make them stop. It's that simple. Crixtal nodded, grateful for the Corvan's straightforward approach. Commander Thokmer is right. We're overthinking this. Standard procedure. Approach, communicate, assess, and respond appropriately. The squadron departed the briefing coordinates and jumped to hyperspace, beginning the 3-day journey to the Kepler sector. During the transit, Crixtal found himself reviewing everything he knew about human space capabilities. Their ships were indeed primitive by galactic standards: chemical rockets for in-system travel, basic fusion drives for interstellar journeys, simple laser and projectile weapons. They had been members of the Galactic Council for 50 cycles, but had contributed little to the technological advancement of galactic civilization. If anything, humans seemed to prefer adapting existing technologies rather than developing new ones. They bought Etherian stealth systems, Corvan weapons, Vortanian navigation systems, and hive mind biotechnology, combining them in ways that were functional but unimaginative. Most galactic analysts considered them to be competent but unremarkable, a species that would probably spend the next few centuries slowly catching up to the galactic standard. On the second day of their journey, Captain Veltara contacted Crystal with concerning news. "Lieutenant, my ship's long-range sensors are detecting something unusual," she reported, her ethereal form materializing on his communication screen. "We're receiving automated distress signals from the Kepler sector." "What kind of distress signals?" "Multiple sources, all using standard galactic emergency protocols. Ship systems failures, environmental emergencies, navigation errors, but the patterns are strange." "Strange how?" "They're too regular," Veltara explained. "Distress calls are typically chaotic, urgent, filled with specific details about the nature of the emergency. These signals contain all the correct information, but they feel scripted." Felt a chill run through his carapace, remembering Zethkar's warnings about human deception. "How many signals are you detecting?" 17 distinct sources, scattered throughout the sector, all claiming to be civilian vessels experiencing various technical difficulties. "Any responses to the distress calls?" "Yes, that's the other unusual thing. Multiple human ships are already en route to provide assistance. Response times suggest they were positioned to intercept before the distress calls were even sent." Commander Thokmer's voice cut through the comm channel with typical Corvan directness. "Obviously, a coincidence. Humans may be primitive, but they're not stupid enough to fake distress calls in a council-monitored sector." Subqueen Zizi Kaith's pheromone-scented communication was more cautious. "The hive mind suggests extreme caution. Human behavioral patterns indicate sophisticated planning abilities when motivated by survival or resource acquisition." Made his decision. "We maintain course and heading. When we arrive in the sector, we'll investigate the mining operations first, then check on these distress calls if time permits." The squadron dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system 72 hours later. What they found defied their expectations in every way. The asteroid belt that should have been full of pristine space rocks was indeed showing signs of large-scale mining operations. But instead of the crude strip mining they had expected to find, the asteroids had been carefully carved into geometric patterns. Massive chunks of rock and metal had been precisely extracted, leaving behind structures that almost looked like. "Are those defensive positions?" Captain Veltara whispered over the comm channel. Stared at his tactical display in growing horror. The asteroids hadn't been mined randomly. They had been systematically converted into a network of fortified positions, with clear fields of fire covering every approach vector into the system. Sensor sweeps revealed weapon emplacements, shield generators, and communication arrays built into the rock formations. "This isn't mining," he said slowly. "This is military construction." Commander Thokmer's voice carried a note of concern for the first time. "Those defensive positions could hold off a battle fleet. How long would it take to build something like this?" "Years," Subqueen Zizi Kaith replied through her pheromone translators. "The hive mind calculates minimum construction time at 4 standard cycles for a project of this scope." "But humans have only been in this sector for 6 months, Crystal protested. "Intelligence reports confirmed this was uninhabited space until recently." "Perhaps our intelligence was wrong," Captain Veltara suggested, though her tone indicated she didn't believe her own words. The squadron's sensors began detecting active scans from multiple directions. They were being watched, analyzed, targeted. Red warning lights flickered across every bridge as weapon locks registered on their ships. "This is Lieutenant Crystal of the Vortanian Defense Fleet," he broadcast on standard diplomatic frequencies. "We are conducting a routine investigation of reported mining violations in this system. Please respond." The response came immediately, transmitted on multiple channels simultaneously. A human face appeared on their screens, a middle-aged male with gray hair and calm brown eyes. He wore what looked like a simple mining supervisor's uniform, but something in his expression reminded Crixtel uncomfortably of Zethkar's description of Captain Sarah Chen. "This is Director James Harrison of the Kepler Mining Consortium," the human said with a warm smile. "Welcome to our little operation out here. I'm afraid you've caught us during a busy time. We're dealing with several emergency situations that require our immediate attention." "Emergency situations?" Crixtel asked. "Oh yes, terrible luck really. 17 civilian ships have experienced various technical difficulties in the past few hours. Navigation failures, life support problems, reactor instabilities. Our rescue crews are spread pretty thin trying to help everyone." The exact number of distress calls that Captain Veltara had detected. Crixtel's mandibles began clicking involuntarily. "Director Harrison, our sensors indicate that this system contains military-grade defensive installations. Can you explain the nature of these constructions?" Harrison's smile never wavered. "Safety precautions, Lieutenant. This is dangerous work we're doing out here, asteroid mining in an unstable stellar region far from any Council protection. We've had problems with pirates, equipment failures, solar flare activity. These installations help us protect our workers and our investment." "The scale of these installations seems excessive for civilian protection," Crixtel pressed. "Does it?" Harrison asked, his tone remaining friendly and conversational. "How familiar are you with human safety protocols, Lieutenant? We have this saying, 'Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.' It served us well throughout our history." Subqueen ZZ Kaith's pheromone transmission carried urgent undertones. "Lieutenant, the hive mind detects multiple large vessels approaching from outside sensor range. Trajectory suggests coordinated movement patterns." "Director Harrison," Crixtel said, trying to keep his voice steady, "we need to conduct a formal inspection of your operations to ensure compliance with Council regulations." "Of course," Harrison replied enthusiastically. "We'd be delighted to give you the full tour. In fact, I've already dispatched some of our ships to escort you to our main facility. They should be arriving any moment now." On every tactical display in the squadron, new contacts began appearing. Ships were emerging from concealment among the carved asteroids, rising from the sensor shadows of the system's larger planets, dropping out of hyperspace at calculated intervals. Not the crude mining vessels they had expected, but sleek, purposeful craft that moved with predatory grace. "My God," Captain Veltara breathed, her luminous form flickering with fear. "How many ships do they have?" The count kept climbing. 20 ships, 30, 50. More contacts appeared every few seconds, all converging on the squadron's position with coordinated precision. These weren't random mining vessels, they were organized like a military fleet. "Director Harrison," Crixtel said, his voice cracking slightly, "this appears to be more than a simple mining operation." "Oh, you're absolutely right, Lieutenant," Harrison replied, and for the first time his smile took on a distinctly predatory quality. "This is much more than a simple mining operation." Commander Thokmer's weapon systems came online with an audible whine. "I don't like the sound of that, human." "Commander Thokmer of the Iron Fist," Harrison said, reading from what was obviously a prepared briefing. "Corvan military, 17 battles, veteran of the methane wars. Your ship carries plasma cannons, particle beam arrays, and enough firepower to level a small city. Very impressive." The fact that the human knew Thokmer's name and military history sent ice through every member of the squadron. "Captain Veltara," Harrison continued, turning his attention to the Etherian vessel, "your stealth capabilities are legendary among your people. The Plasma Dancer has participated in more covert operations than any other ship in the Etherian fleet. We're honored by your presence." "How do you know these things?" Veltara whispered. "Subqueen ZZ Kaith," Harrison said, focusing on the hive mind representative. "The living weapon is one of only 12 bioships currently active in this sector. Your vessel can adapt its configuration in real time, growing new weapons and defensive systems as needed. Fascinating biotechnology." "And Lieutenant Crixtel," Harrison said finally, his brown eyes seeming to look directly at the young Vortanian through the screen. "Fresh from the academy, eager to prove himself, ready to uphold the noble traditions of the Vortanian defense fleet. Your instructor, Commander Zethkar, must be very proud." The mention of Zethkar's name hit Crystal like a physical blow. "You know Commander Zethkar." "Oh yes," Harrison said softly. "We know Commander Zethkar very well. He's the one who taught us the importance of being properly prepared for unexpected visitors." The squadron was now completely surrounded. The human ships had moved into a perfect three-dimensional formation that covered every possible escape route. But they weren't attacking, they were simply waiting. "What do you want?" Crystal asked. "Want," Harrison laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both friendly and terrifying. "Lieutenant, I think you misunderstand the situation. This isn't about what we want. This is about what you're going to do." "Which is?" "You're going to turn your ships around and return to your base," Harrison said matter-of-factly. "You're going to file a report stating that you found no evidence of illegal mining activities in this sector. You're going to recommend that the Kepler system be classified as a restricted area due to dangerous stellar phenomena." "And if we refuse?" Harrison's smile disappeared for the first time since the conversation began. When he spoke again, his voice carried the kind of cold certainty that made predators successful. "Then you'll discover why Commander Zethkar has been trying so hard to warn people about us." The communication ended abruptly, leaving the squadron alone with their thoughts and their fear. Around them, 50 human ships maintained their positions with mechanical precision, neither advancing nor retreating, simply demonstrating their overwhelming numerical advantage. "What are your orders, Lieutenant?" Commander Thokmer asked, though his usual bluster had been replaced by something approaching respect for their opponents. Stared at the tactical display, remembering every word of Zethkar's warning. The humans weren't just mining asteroids, they were building a military base. They weren't just defending themselves, they were sending a message. And they weren't just another species trying to make their way in the galaxy, they were apex predators claiming new territory. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "All ships prepare to withdraw." "Sir," Captain Veltara's voice carried surprise. "We outnumber them 50-4. Our combined firepower should be sufficient to—" "To what?" interrupted. "To start a war we're not prepared to fight, to discover what weapons those ships are really carrying, to find out what other surprises the humans have prepared for us." He thought about Director Harrison's friendly demeanor, his detailed knowledge of each ship and crew member, his calm confidence in the face of what should have been a superior force. Most of all, he thought about Commander Zethkar's haunted eyes and his warning about humans never being as unprepared as they seemed. "We withdraw," Crystal ordered. "All ships set course for home base, maximum speed." As the Vortanian squadron turned away from the Kepler system, their sensors detected something that would haunt their dreams for cycles to come. The human ships weren't pursuing them or celebrating their victory. Instead, they were calmly returning to their positions among the carved asteroids, resuming whatever work they had been doing before the interruption. As if the arrival and departure of 4 military vessels had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience in their day. 3 hours later, when the squadron was safely in hyperspace, Crystal received a final transmission from the Kepler system. Director Harrison's face appeared on his screen one last time, wearing the same warm, friendly smile. "Lieutenant Crystal," he said pleasantly, "please give our regards to Commander Zethkar. Tell him that Captain Sarah Chen says hello and that we haven't forgotten the lessons we learned during our last meeting." The transmission ended, leaving Crystal alone with the terrible realization that Commander Zethkar had been absolutely right about everything. 6 months after the Kepler incident, the galaxy had begun to change in ways that most beings didn't yet understand. Lieutenant Crystal, now promoted to commander after filing his carefully worded report, sat once again across from Zethkar in the same cantina on Station Omega-7. But this time, they were not alone. Around their table sat representatives from a dozen species, all bearing the same haunted expression that Crystal had come to recognize in veterans who had encountered humans in space. There was Captain Veltara, her usually luminous form dim with worry. Commander Thokmer sat silent in his environmental suit, his usual aggressive demeanor replaced by careful thoughtfulness. Sub-Queen Zizi Kaith clicked and chittered softly, her pheromone emissions carrying undertones of profound unease. But there were others as well. Admiral Nexus 7 of the Synthetic Collective, his chrome-plated head reflecting the cantina's lights as he processed data streams that were invisible to organic minds. Elder Patriarch Gornath of the Stone Singer civilization, his massive crystalline form resonating with subsonic frequencies that spoke of ancient fears awakened. Even Ambassador Fluix of the Nebula Dancers had manifested a physical form for this gathering, her gaseous body held together by electromagnetic fields and desperate hope. "The situation is worse than any of us imagined," Zethkar began without preamble. "In the 6 months since Commander Crixtal's encounter in the Kepler system, we have documented 47 similar incidents across the galaxy. Admiral Nexus 7's optical sensors focused on the old Vortanian. Define similar incidents for the record, Commander Zethkar." "Military reconnaissance forces investigating human activities, only to discover that those activities are far more extensive and sophisticated than intelligence reports suggested," Zethkar replied. "In every case, the investigating forces were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and ultimately forced to withdraw without taking any action." Elder Patriarch Gornath's crystalline structure vibrated with deep, resonant tones. "The Stone Singers have experienced this as well. We detected what appeared to be unauthorized mining in our sacred crystal fields. When our guardians investigated, they found humans extracting rare minerals with precision that suggested intimate knowledge of our geological formations." "How intimate?" Ambassador Fluix asked, her gaseous form swirling with agitation. "They knew the exact locations of veins that we had not yet mapped ourselves," Gornath replied grimly. "They were excavating with techniques specifically designed to avoid damaging our neural crystal networks. They understood our biology better than most of our own people." Subqueen ZZ Kaith's pheromone emissions shifted to a pattern that indicated alarm among the hive mind species. "The collective has made a disturbing discovery. Analysis of human trade patterns over the past 50 cycles reveals systematic acquisition of biological samples from every major species in the galaxy." "What kind of biological samples?" Crixtal asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Everything," ZZ Kaith replied. "Genetic material, neural tissue, sensory organs, reproductive cells, even waste products. All obtained through legitimate trade agreements, medical research partnerships, and cultural exchange programs." Captain Veltara's form flickered with distress. "My people granted humans access to our empathic research facilities 20 cycles ago. They claimed to be studying the relationship between consciousness and quantum fields. We thought we were helping them understand their own potential for psychic development." "What did they really want?" Commander Thokmer asked. "They were mapping our telepathic abilities," Veltara admitted. "Learning how we process emotional information, how we detect deception, how we share thoughts across vast distances. They now understand our capabilities better than we do." Admiral Nexus 7 processed this information for several microseconds before speaking. "The synthetic collective has reached similar conclusions regarding human infiltration of our data networks. Over the past 30 cycles, humans have contributed to 17 major technological development projects. In each case, they have gained access to core programming protocols, manufacturing specifications, and strategic databases." "Have they stolen anything?" Crixtal asked. "Nothing overtly," the Admiral replied. "But their pattern of access suggests they have been systematically documenting every aspect of synthetic consciousness, artificial intelligence development, and cybernetic integration. They now possess comprehensive technical specifications for every type of artificial being in the galaxy." Zethkar leaned back in his chair, his scarred face grim. "What we are describing is not random curiosity or normal intelligence gathering. This is a comprehensive study of potential prey species." The word prey sent a chill through every being at the table. Ambassador Fluix's gaseous form contracted with fear. "The Nebula Dancers have had minimal contact with humans. Perhaps our unique physiology makes us less interesting to them." "I'm afraid not," Zethkar replied sadly. 3 months ago, human researchers approached your people requesting permission to study gas giant atmospheric dynamics. They claimed to be interested in weather prediction and climate modeling. Yes, we granted them access to our storm-singing ceremonies and atmospheric manipulation techniques, Fluix confirmed. They seemed genuinely fascinated by our ability to exist in gaseous form. "They were learning how to fight you," Zethkar said bluntly. "How to disrupt your electromagnetic coherence, how to disperse your consciousness, how to prevent you from reforming your physical manifestation. They now know exactly how to kill a Nebula Dancer." The cantina fell silent except for the normal sounds of the station around them. Each representative sat with their own species, growing realization that humanity had been studying them as a predator studies prey. "What do we do?" Elder Patriarch Gornath asked finally, his crystalline structure resonating with harmonics of despair. "That depends," Zethkar replied, "on whether you want to hear the rest of what I've learned." Commander Crixtal felt his mandibles clicking involuntarily. "There's more." "Much more," Zethkar confirmed. "Do you want to know why humans have been so patient, so careful, so methodical in their approach? Do you want to understand why they've spent 50 cycles learning about us instead of simply conquering us outright?" "Tell us," Admiral Nexus 7 said, his optical sensors focusing intently on the old commander. Zethkar stood and activated a holographic projector in the center of the table. A three-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, with various systems highlighted in different colors. "This is human space 50 cycles ago," he began. The display showed a tiny cluster of systems around Earth, barely visible against the vast scope of the galactic map. "This is human space today." The display changed dramatically. Green indicators showed human colonies, blue showed systems with human military presence, yellow indicated systems with significant human economic activity. The pattern spread across nearly a quarter of the galaxy. "But that's not the full picture," Zethkar continued. "This is the galaxy according to human strategic planning." The display changed again, and gasps echoed around the table. Red lines connected every major species homeworld, every significant trade route, every strategic resource deposit, every military base. The pattern revealed a comprehensive web of influence and control that encompassed the entire galaxy. "How did you obtain this information?" Sub-Queen ZZ Kaith asked, her pheromone emissions shifting to patterns of disbelief. "From Captain Sarah Chen herself," Zethkar replied quietly. 3 weeks ago, she contacted me directly. She invited me to meet with her on a neutral station in the Outer Rim. "You met with her?" Crixtal asked in shock. "The human who destroyed your fleet?" "The same one," Zethkar confirmed. "She wanted to deliver a message to the galaxy's military leaders, a final warning, she called it." "What kind of warning?" Zethkar deactivated the holographic display and looked around the table at each representative in turn. "She told me that humanity's period of passive observation is ending. For 50 cycles, they have been learning, studying, preparing. They now know everything there is to know about every major species in the galaxy. They have contingency plans for every possible military response, economic sanctions, political maneuvering, or technological development that might threaten their interests." "What does that mean, practically speaking?" Commander Thokmer asked. "It means," Zethkar replied slowly, "that humans are about to stop pretending to be just another member species of the Galactic Council. They are preparing to take their rightful place as the galaxy's apex predators." Ambassador Fluix's gaseous form swirled with agitation. "Surely the Council will respond. The combined military might of all member species." "Has already been accounted for," Zethkar interrupted. "Captain Chen showed me their projections. Every possible military alliance, every strategic resource, every technological advantage that we might bring to bear against them. They have countermeasures for all of it." "That's impossible," Elder Patriarch Gornath resonated with disbelief. "The galaxy contains thousands of species, millions of worlds, resources beyond calculation. And humans have been systematically cataloging all of it for 50 cycles," Zethkar replied. "While we were welcoming them into our civilizations, sharing our knowledge and cultures, they were building the most comprehensive intelligence network in galactic history." Admiral Nexus 7's processing systems hummed with activity as he analyzed the implications. "If their intelligence is as comprehensive as you suggest, then traditional military responses would be ineffective. They would know our capabilities, our strategies, our weaknesses better than we know them ourselves." "Exactly," Zethkar confirmed, "but that's not the worst part." The table fell silent again, waiting for the revelation that would complete their understanding of humanity's true nature. "Captain Chen told me that humans don't actually want to conquer the galaxy," Zethkar said finally. "They don't want to rule over other species or extract tribute or establish an empire." "Then what do they want?" Captain Veltura asked. "They want to manage it," Zethkar replied. They see the galaxy as an ecosystem that needs careful tending. Some species are useful as they are, others need to be guided into more appropriate roles. A few will need to be removed entirely to maintain balance. Removed, Subqueen ZZ Kaith's pheromone emissions spiked with alarm. Species that are too aggressive, too expansionist, too likely to disrupt the stability that humans are trying to create, Zethkar explained. Captain Chen was very specific about this. Humanity doesn't see themselves as conquerors, they see themselves as gardeners. The implications hit each representative with the force of a physical blow. Humans weren't planning to invade and subjugate the galaxy. They were planning to prune it like a garden, removing elements that didn't fit their vision of galactic harmony. "How long do we have?" Commander Crixtal asked quietly. "According to Captain Chen, the transition has already begun," Zethkar replied. "The incidents we've been experiencing, the confrontations, the demonstrations of human capabilities, the systematic mapping of our responses, these are final tests. They're confirming that their preparations are complete. And then we'll start seeing changes in galactic politics," Zethkar said grimly. "Trade agreements that somehow always favor human interests, military conflicts that are resolved by timely human intervention, economic pressures that force species to accept human mediation, technological dependencies that make resistance impossible. They'll be puppet masters," Admiral Nexus 7 concluded, "and we'll be the puppets. Unless," Elder Patriarch Gornath resonated with sudden hope, "we can form an alliance. Unite all the major species against this threat before it's too late." Zethkar shook his head sadly. Captain Chen anticipated that response as well. "She showed me their analysis of every possible alliance configuration. They have strategies for dealing with united opposition that are disturbing." "What kind of strategies?" "They would allow the alliance to form," Zethkar explained. "They would let us unite our fleets, combine our resources, develop our battle plans. They would even let us attack first to maintain their moral justification for what comes next." "Which is?" "The systematic demonstration that resistance is futile," Zethkar replied. "They would defeat our combined forces so completely, so efficiently, that no species would ever consider opposing them again. And they would do it in a way that appears to be defensive action against an aggressive alliance." The weight of hopelessness settled over the table like a heavy blanket. Each representative contemplated the terrible reality of their situation, that their species had been outmaneuvered before they even realized a game was being played. "So what do we do?" Captain Veltara whispered. Zethkar sat back down and looked around the table one final time. "We make a choice," he said simply. "We can try to resist and be destroyed as a warning to others. We can try to negotiate and become willing participants in our own subjugation. Or we can accept that the galaxy now belongs to humanity and try to find a place in their vision of galactic order." "That's not really a choice," Commander Thokmer protested. "No," Zethkar agreed. "It's not, but it's the only options left to us." As the representatives began to discuss the impossible decision facing their species, none of them noticed the small human maintenance worker who had been quietly cleaning tables near their gathering. None of them realized that their entire conversation had been monitored and recorded by sensors that had been tracking their movements since they first entered the cantina. Deep in the station's computer systems, encrypted data packets began transmitting to distant human ships, carrying detailed psychological profiles and strategic assessments to planning centers scattered across the galaxy. The hunt that had begun 50 cycles ago was finally entering its endgame phase. Humanity had learned everything it needed to know about its prey. Now it was time to begin the harvest. In a small office aboard a human ship light years away, Director James Harrison reviewed the transmission from Station Omega 7. He smiled as he read the psychological evaluations of each species' representatives, nodding their fear, their desperation, their growing recognition of humanity's superiority. He opened a communication channel to Captain Sarah Chen, who was currently overseeing the final preparations for Phase 2 of the operation. "Sarah," he said when her face appeared on his screen, "they're finally beginning to understand. The old Vortanian has done exactly what we hoped he would, spread the truth to all the major species." "Good," Chen replied. "How are they responding?" "Exactly as predicted. Fear, denial, desperate searching for options that don't exist. The psychological conditioning is complete. Excellent, Chen said with satisfaction. Signal all stations. Begin Phase 2. It's time to show the galaxy what apex predators really look like when they stop playing with their food. Across the galaxy, human ships that had been masquerading as merchants, researchers, and aid workers began revealing their true nature. The Great Deception was ending, and humanity's true reign over the galaxy was about to begin. The age of human supremacy had arrived, and the prey species were finally beginning to understand that they had never been the hunters in this cosmic game. They had always been the hunted, and now the chase was over.